Okay. All right. Let's jump right into this. Thank you guys for being so punctual. Where are you right now? This is a cool studio.
This is my studio. This is my my personal space.
Very cool. Very cool. Is that a ukulele in the back there?
That is two ukuleles, yeah.
Nice. I don't know if I've ever heard ukulele on any of your stuff.
I don't know if it's ever been used on anything. Oh no, that's not true. The one of the scores that Brian and I did, the Crestone score, there's some ukulele in there.
Right.
That if you guys are familiar, that Sand That Moves track is a ukulele.
Oh, okay. There's like a lot of instruments on that one, right? I feel like there's like a dulcimer or something. It's got that. Is that right?
Uh,
Dulcimer?
no, I don't think it's a dulcimer. I think it's just that. I played a 12-string electric guitar, but with no amplifier. Like I just mic'd the guitar. Brian plays, does he play hurdy-gurdy in that? No, I guess maybe he doesn't.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Like, a lot of uh modular synth stuff and some piano. It's on there.
Anyway, let's talk about a different album today. Okay, so Herald, Linear B. It's a new record. It just came out last Friday, the 14th. Is that right?
Yeah, please so. I thought it was the day before and posted all these like grateful things and TV as we put out. I was like, actually, records come out on Friday, man. I was like, "Right, it's a long week. It's hot, I work construction. I was like tired, and I was
There
like,
you
hey,
go.
Friday tomorrow, but I was mistaken. It was just a Wednesday night. So yeah, it did a week ago. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, we've listened to it. I love it. It's such a good album. Like it's shockingly good. Really. I really hope that it reaches as many ears as possible because it's been stuck in like Greg and I were actually like singing Baz and Light like just before you guys
Baz and
like
Edge.
jumped on. Baz and Edge, sorry. Lights was the one
Lights is
before it.
yeah.
So you guys are friends, you're carpenters, you're musicians, how did this all start? I know there's like a little bit of a blurb on the Bandcamp page, but for those who haven't read it, how did you guys get to know one another and how did this all come about?
It goes back to, I think in like we were trying to actually rehash it last night to try and remember. I think in like 2012 or 2013, I had been back in Baltimore for a couple of years and had sort of been keeping my head low, but was starting to try and like engage with the city and the culture. And a friend of mine connected me with a group of people that Baltimore is just a very very rich with like little pockets of cool houses or warehouse scenes that sort of pop up and like are sort of central sort of places for a period of time. And there was a place called the Book House that I went to a party at, and Lawrence was there too, and we ended up just talking about music that night. And I think there was a lot of mezcal involved, and just kind of realized we had a lot of kind of, I don't know, mutual Venn diagram of musical tastes that seemed inspiring to both of us, and just were kind of just became friends through that. Not really in any sort of context of talking about making music. It was really just meeting a new friend and enjoying hanging out.
I was so far out of the loop of making music. I mean, I moved to Baltimore in very early 2000, and I played in bands in London in the 90s, but it hadn't all ended particularly well. And when I moved here, I met my wife and moved here. I just did something else, and it was so natural. The thing when you're in your 20s, you form a band with the people you sit up late at night talking to. You move to a new city, you'd have to start answering ads or something. I'm not really that kind of person, I'm not going to go like, oh, I could be in that band based on an ad. It's just going to be a social thing. It always was. So it didn't really happen. I met people I liked, but I just didn't. And then years went by and I got more into doing carpentry, and we moved away for a few years from Baltimore. And when we moved back, I suppose there was this shock that people our age weren't going out anymore. People bought a house, they've had kids, but there was this incredible scene of people, a few years younger doing music in Baltimore. So we just started going out more and meeting, as Josh said, this circle of people, these certain tables in certain houses where there's just fucking great conversation, that reminds you why you go out, sort of thing, and why you stay open to meeting people of different walks. And I think initially we definitely spoke about music, but also I was a carpenter, and I was around the time I started my own company for a couple of years, and Josh ended up working with me quite a lot because he was in town for a while, wasn't touring at the time, and you work with somebody, you've also, you know, you've got the thing of forming a work dynamic. You've also got the thing of picking what you listen to and bickering about that as well as about the work and determining what you do and don't, what tastes you do and don't share. And by the time we got through, I don't know, a pretty solid year of working together, we had pretty good idea of each other's strengths and weaknesses, but also a good idea of what kind of music impacted us and in what way, you know? And from then on, I think it was a pretty continuous conversation about what we were doing. And you were working on your own stuff, and I was just starting to think that I might try doing stuff again. But it really had been a long time for me. But then I was surrounded by all these people who were doing music, and I was like, oh, well, I should be as well. And most of them had broken equipment that they weren't using. So I'd be like, hey, can I borrow this? They'd be like, yeah, I haven't used it in years. It doesn't really work. And through that, build up a very basic setup. And I don't know, ideas came, and Josh was always someone I could bounce them off, who would also be pretty honest. Be like, well, that's cute or that's funny or something, but that's actually quite good. You know, the difference, which you don't always know when you're getting started, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the sign of having a true friend, is someone who's not afraid to tell you when the thing that you made isn't good.
Absolutely. Or say, yeah, that's a thing, but I would, you know, there's no sense that you should advance it or anything. But then certain things he would suggest in advancing them.
Right.
And, you know, because there's an inevitable aspect when I'm just in my basement of my house. My wife's a nurse, she works nights, she'd go to work and I would go down in the basement and do stuff. But you're in the basement of your house, you feel like the neighbors can hear you. So you kind of mutter. You don't really sing, you know, you think if I sing fully. And I think one of the first things was Josh was like, you're not really a mutterer as a person, but you're muttering on these you're slightly muttering, you're not really singing. And I was like, I've never sung. I was the drummer in bands. I didn't sing. So that's, I suppose.
Yeah, and there was like a development of sort of, and again, this was like, God, like 6 or 7 years into our friendship before he even started doing this, you know. I mean, we kind of started to hang out 2012, 2013. That year, I think that I worked with him was maybe 2016 or 17 even. I mean, it was kind of quite plenty of years later. I'd finally made Sleep Cycle, and when he first started making things and sending them to me, most of them initially didn't even have vocals on them, and they were cool, like kind of atmospheric things. I mean, you'd recognize it as the same music that's on this record. I mean, not literally the same pieces, but like the same kind of like palette, you know, like kind of dirty synths and moody kind of beats and stuff. But they generally would just sort of be like a loop that went for, you know, a minute and a half or 2 minutes or 3 minutes with no kind of melody or vocal part. And it was, you know, I just didn't, I wasn't like connecting with it in a way where I was like, fuck, man, this is amazing. And then he did start doing stuff that was like had vocal parts. And like you said, he was kind of muttering them. But there was a few that started to be like, I can hear there's like a really good hook in there. Like that's actually like really catchy. But yeah, you got to do it. You got to do it. If you're going to do it, you got to do it. And the idea of like, of recording a more proper vocal came up, and he, you know, I have the studio here, but I don't even think it was anywhere near as developed as it even is now. And it is just a room with a bunch of gear in it. And there's a kind of a nicer full service studio in Baltimore that I'd actually never been to before. And he was like, I feel like I want to go to like a studio. I want to like pay for studio time. I want to like feel what that feels like to go into a room, which I think was actually a really cool, kind of a cool revelation for both of us. I mean, weirdly, I you know, all the records I've worked on, they've always been, you know, in houses that I owned, or like I haven't really like run sessions in studios. I run sessions in makeshift spaces in Dave's house or my house or whatever. And so we went into this place and you know, picked one song. I think it was Poster from Athena, which and just kind of had Lawrence run through it a bunch. And I think we ended up being in there for close to, I don't know, probably like a 10-hour day. And you know, it's just the experience. I think for both of us, it was sort of kind of a weirdly a revelation, and for different reasons for each of us, but just sort of being really focused on that one piece of music in that room for that period of time, and sort of seeing what sort of came out the other side. It was a very raw thing when we went in there, and the shape that you hear on the record pretty much more or less came together that day. I mean, it's a lot of the production that I did pretty much stuck, and you know, Lawrence's vocal ideas were already there and they were his, but it was like cool to kind of be on the other side of the glass and sort of helping him, you know, you're going to double this vocal. You're going to do it. You're going to do it twice. This is how you do that. Or, hear how he'd be like, maybe his melody would be doing one thing. And I'd be like, I think you actually mean to do this. And I'd sort of, the whole thing just kind of by the end of the day, we sat and we were like, whoa, this is like a really great track.
It was definitely the end of the day. Like my wife, she was glad I was doing something when she was at work. She works nights, but she didn't really ask what I'm doing. But I came back that day and she was like, all right, you paid money for this. You may as well let me hear it. And I was like, right. And she's an amazing woman, but she's very at ease being critical. So I gave her the headphones and sat there and I was like, fuck, I don't think she'd ever heard me sing before. And she went, is that you? I said, yeah. And she said, you should do more of those. And I was like, okay, cool. That means, that's a very straightforward response. And I don't think there was any doubt. I didn't know what to expect doing something like that. I was always just the drummer in bands that could afford one day to record and one day to mix, I'd never done anything like that. And yeah, it was like 10 hours without really knowing what time of day it was, and came out just going like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it sounds like. I still don't really know what it sounds like, but I still hear it and go like, I'm not embarrassed to play it, but I think it's sound wise I think I am very aware how much of that is down to Josh's work because I have the audio of what it sounded like before he got his hands on it. It's cool, it's interesting, but nobody would. It's a very different sound experience,
That'd be cool to hear that, though.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if it was like a digital bonus track or something, or like something like that. But yeah, you mentioned you did vocals. This is like your first time sort of in that arena. Is it all you on the record, or did Josh jump in and like do some guest backup vocals at all?
Only on one song.
I did do vocals on one song. What did I do?
Hydrogen Tide. You sang on the chorus.
Oh, right. Like we sang together in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did like a group vocal on Hydrogen Tide that was just the two of us in a room, but like back from the mic.
That's it though, I think.
I think there was one thing I remember. I feel like I have a memory of trying to do something and maybe you being like, it's cool, but it doesn't feel like me. So like, let's not do that. And I was like, you're totally right. This doesn't feel like you.
Well, I think it's mainly just because when you go through the album and, you're going into it as an Animal Collective fan and you know that Deakin is the one that produced it, there are just a few moments on the album where you're like, their vocal ranges sound so similar in like the mid-range that genuinely I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But that's cool to hear that did actually make it on there. Because this very much has like the feeling of like, if you're familiar with Sleep Cycle and some of your other releases, you can definitely listen to this and be like, oh yeah, this has Deakin all over it for sure. And it's just really cool to have more than just the 6 tracks on Sleep Cycle and whatnot to, sort of be in that zone that we're used to as fans of this kind of style.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear too, I mean, in terms of like what my role was, it is almost completely strictly as a knob turner. I wasn't like I played guitar on Lights. There's an acoustic guitar that comes into the chorus, which was really just an idea that he was trying to do, and he just kind of couldn't play it. And then I was like, well, I can do it, and then I kind of modified it a bit to make it into something that kind of fit more my taste. But otherwise, instrumentally, it's all Lawrence. It's me just taking things he'd already tracked and me just like shaping them and making decisions about delays and reverbs and all the kind of fun toys I got to play with and mixing it. But really at the end of the day, all the music is totally Lawrence. I mean, there's probably moments where I might have influenced a harmony decision, like, hey man, can you sing this harmony? Like,
there's definitely
I have an idea.
Yeah.
Like sing this, but they're relatively minimal. I mean, really the.
But I do think that I got to know Josh while the Sleep Cycle thing was going on. I know it was not the easiest thing to get done.
No.
And I think once it came out, I was hearing it, knowing you and recognizing what it takes for some people just create all the time. Some people it just comes out, it floods out. That's not the case with Josh, you probably know. And getting to know him, realizing what had gone into this and the amount of work that must have gone into it. It was a massively impactful record for me. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that because it's a friend, it's someone you met through a different thing. But the level of detail and of sonic expansion that doesn't leave behind emotional expansion was a really massive thing to me. Like realizing that even though these things are happening sound wise, the lyric is keeping pace. The lyric is totally capable of getting you to the same place as the sound is, or something. That was massively. I don't know that we would have been listening to the same music at the time at all, and I don't know that that what I would have done would have been any different had I not heard it. But the effort and I think what he was shooting for was definitely a massive thing for me, having been in other sorts of groups and here, yeah, this what was being aimed for, I found very, very impactful.
Cool.
For sure, yeah. I think it's so fascinating though that, still there is this sort of harmonious balance because, like Josh, you are taking on the producer role here, and Lawrence, you're obviously a master at very many different, instruments and different palettes that you can use because there's so much going on in all these tracks, but they sound like they fit into the world of Animal Collective somehow. So were you at all like a fan of Animal Collective, before making this record? Is there any kind of like influence from that kind of universe?
I thought it was a cool group. I'm from a very different background. I was certainly aware of them and I'd heard things that I thought were great. And I liked the idea of this group that had developed at their own pace and sort of popular culture had to catch up with what they were doing rather than the other way around. Clearly, there was this just artistic drive that led to people then coming on board. But I was not particularly a listener until getting to know Josh, which then got me to go. I'm a bit older and a different musical background. I was more like a Joy Division kind of guy, It's just a different angle you come at music. You realize as you talk how many of these things you have in common, how many records actually are within the same Venn diagram. But I think I can honestly say that the influences when I started writing this were from my own background, but probably, I mean, at the time I was writing, I was hanging out with Josh and we were listening to music together and talking about and realizing what impacted him and what impacted me weren't that different. So that is a factor of influence, is the factor of a friendship that is also an artistic shared endeavor. But prior to knowing Josh, no, I mean, I certainly knew some stuff. I certainly loved some stuff, but I was not, no, I don't. I don't think that's where it came from.
And I think it's interesting that people hear it that way. I mean, I guess that does say something to like the kind of choices I make as a mixer and a producer. But I mean, Lawrence is really great at picking sounds. I mean, all the sounds that are on there again are he had already recorded them, and he maybe his especially then where he was at is he just would throw 1,000 ideas at one song, and so part of my role would just to be like, all right, this isn't necessary. And then there'd be some track where he'd be like, oh no, that's a throwaway, just mute that. And I'd be like, wait, let me listen to it. And I'd be like, no, this is actually really good. I'm going to use that. And then, so it's sort of like just sifting through it, but it's all him. It's all kind of already there. And I don't feel listening to it that it sound like it doesn't feel reminiscent of us to me, but it does feel reminiscent kind of as to what he's saying of things that we similarly, we'd have a moment, be like, oh, this is like, it's a bit Echo and the Bunnymen, isn't it? Like, there you go. Like we'd find things that we both kind of saw the same, which is really similar, I think, in the process of how, my band works. I think that we oftentimes, we are influenced by a gazillion things. And when we're working on something, there is this kind of like, oh, this moment, it kind of feels like, a mashup of these kind of, 3 different kind of musical ideas. You hear like Francis Bebe and, whatever, and like, cool. So it's like to be able to know that he's a big fan of, Jesus and Mary Chain, and we can like talk about, like, we can reference that really quickly, and that can like immediately, I kind of know how to get to that place. But it's interesting to me that the end result of that is something that is reminiscent of AC, because it didn't feel that way to me at the time. And I don't see, it's cool. It's actually only been more recently that I've gotten the sense that Lawrence does actually pay attention at all to the music we make. Cause it didn't, when we were working on stuff initially, it didn't really feel like that. And not in a bad way. It just was like, it didn't bother me. It just was like, yeah, it's not it's not the world he comes from. I knew he liked my record. I knew he was aware of who we were, but I didn't get the impression it was something that he really spent much time with, which is, if anything, is actually cool to me. I mean, I think sometimes I have had people approach me to work on music for them who make it really clear that they're really influenced by us. And honestly, that's a little bit of like, I don't know if I want to do that then. If you're feeling like you want to work with me because you want to sound, it's like, that's, so I think the fact that that didn't feel like an actual, like a common reference point felt freeing to me. And I guess I couldn't help myself to still sound like myself, but
it is an amazing thing now for me to listen to stuff that Josh has done and hear things that now I hear my own thing, or things that, bits of Animal Collective music now I'm hearing from a completely different angle than anyone else. I'm sort of working my way back at some degree. And it's really incredible to hear, but it's go like, oh, right, that's a sound that maybe I wouldn't have spotted. And now I have some idea where it comes from. And I wonder, look, but half the time I think, I wonder if that's Josh. I have no idea which one is him. Maybe nobody does, which one's him, which is the other guys. And I know the other guys very, very slightly, met them all a couple of times, all very, very interesting people, clearly with their own take on things. So it's totally fascinating to now hear it again, having a sort of personal insight.
Well, when it comes to sort of carving out your own space artistically, obviously you didn't choose to go by your given name and you picked Herald as a moniker. Is there an origin story behind that name, or is it just, it sounded cool?
I've always liked the word. I definitely have a bit of a sort of I mean, I'm Scottish by raising, but my name is Lawrence Worthington. It's a very English name from like Cheshire in the north of England. Definitely from a sort of family that would go to churches more for the architecture than for the religion, that sort of space. And the Herald's just a word that will be in these places maybe. But there was actually the time when I came up with it, I was living in London and a cross-channel ferry called the Herald of Free Enterprise, a car ferry, drive-on, drive-off ferry, went down in the English Channel. And I don't think anyone dreamt about like cars, the cargo was lost, whatever, but it barely got away from the coast because it turned out that strict limiting of union power within the stevedore sort of shoreman's union had meant that there was no one on the boat checking that the door was closed, basically. So it was this failure of capitalism on a ship called the Herald of Free Enterprise. Just kind of an amazing bit of news. And it stuck with me, and the phrase, the Herald of Free Enterprise, and all the good and bad that could suggest really stuck with me at the time. And that's a pretty cumbersome name. So I think I had a cassette in mind that would be called Herald of Free Enterprise, but it was cumbersome, and the word Herald seemed like a good word. And that's in 1997. So when it came time 4 years ago to put a name on things, I was like, well, I haven't come up with anything better. I still like the word. It seems like, I don't know, it looks okay on a poster, one of those words.
Yeah, a one word artist name will always be catchier, I think, stick in the head than, some elaborate.
Is not really a good one. Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
Well, nice.
Yeah. So speaking of like origin stories here, I mean, the title of the record is Linear B, and that relates to some form of ancient writing style, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. Well, it's Linear B it's the sort of origin of it's a halfway point between hieroglyphics and Greek. So it's sort of a point between cave paintings and language or something. And it was these certain Greek islands, the city of Knossos, Crete, and a few other Greek islands. They found this, and it's a calligraphy rather than just a cave painting. So it's this point at which language, you're starting to repeat things. You're getting beyond just using gestures and getting into repeating so as to form words. And you very kindly said earlier that I'm clearly a musician, but I'm really not. GarageBand allows me to be on, but I really do play chords like I play the song like that, and then I play the song like that. I can play guitar a little bit, but I'm really not a musician. I think I hear maybe what musicians hear, but I've never had the discipline to teach myself an instrument very well. And I felt like Linear B, when I read about it, because I was probably thinking of somewhere nice to go on holiday, thinking about the Greek islands. We have a very dear mutual friend who's from one of those islands. And the thing of this language that's somewhere between purely gesture and formulaic rule-based language, I was like, that's me. And then the cover is, well, it's a piece of wood that I nearly lost my finger cutting. I was cutting that piece of wood and it flipped and my finger got drawn into the blade. But to me, it looks a bit like failed evolutionary steps. Like the thing is trying to stand up, it almost stands and then it just falls over again, which perhaps is a self-deprecating view of my own evolutionary steps as a musician. I mean, that's stretching it a bit, but that sort of thing. So Linear B just seemed like a good place to be, somewhere between just throwing stuff and being in control.
That's fantastic, actually. It's interesting too that it's got, this tie to like Greece, because you've got the poster from Athena, and then is not Photis, I might be pronouncing that wrong. Is that not a Greek name?
It is actually. Photis is it's a book called The Golden Dawn, which is maybe the first novel, and it's about this young man who witnesses a witch, like a good witch, but he witnesses a woman in the town climb to the top of a tower, turn into a bird, and soar off. And he's like, I want to do that. So he approaches her assistant, who is the slave girl Photis, and he's totally into Photis. She's clearly, she's beautiful and she's fun. And she says, oh, all you have to do is come with me up the tower and repeat what she says, and you'll turn into whatever creature you deserve to turn into, basically. So he follows her up, he watches the thing, he says the same chant, and he's turned into an ass. And he spends most of the rest of his life as an ass, being abused, being treated. So it's like one of the funniest books I've ever read. And Photis is like, I don't know, she's a totally addictive, funny character, She's, and I suppose I just think she's cute. I suppose it's that, and the song's about someone I think's cute or something. And Athena, Athena clearly relates to the goddess theme, but Athena was a shop in the UK when I was a teenager where you could buy like posters of, like a hippie girl sitting smoking a joint, or like a sunset or something. There were these posters that certain type of people's house you go around to, there would be posters on the wall that were from there. And they were they're sort of totems of youth or something, these posters, because only certain images were quality enough to become an Athena poster. That's, but also of course related to the Greek god, I don't
Awesome.
Dying, but yeah, that's the origin of that, I suppose.
Very cool. Yeah, I think like it's also fascinating. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but like to have these historical ties for a record that was like 20 plus years in the making feels like it all ties together so well. Was that part of like the intention as well? Having it be such a long journey?
Sure. Yeah. Fucking right. I suppose I don't read as much as I mean to. I suppose I take notes when I read a book. I suppose I'm a bit into history, am I?
Yeah,
I'm pretty into
you're
history.
very into history.
I'm more of a non-fiction reader than a fiction reader. So historical phases hit me and I lose 6 months on a historical phase or a sociological group. That's more how I read rather than certain authors, I suppose. So maybe that's inevitable. Also, my whole family are, I have a brother who's a historian. My other brother could easily be a historian. My dad, my history was definitely a big part of the house growing up, So it's not, and I think this is something about growing up where I did in the Highlands of Scotland, is that things are ancient, but you don't even really think about it. Like there's these stones at the top of the town. They're the ruins of some ancient structure. And they're just where you sit as a kid. And looking back, they may well be the ruins of a 12th century house or something. You know what I mean? Like, and there are ancient stones with Pictish carving on them that you sort of sit and lean against to drink beer when you're a teenager. Like history's right there. In rural Scotland, history is right there. It's not alienating at all. It's sort of part of who you are. And a lot of the people you're friends with, their families may have been there for hundreds, thousands of years or something. I realized being in other places how much how natural history feels there, I suppose.
So, as far as the connection to the like 25 years that have passed, have any of the songs on Linear B survived that amount of time, or was it just the like inclination to want to make a solo album?
I don't think any of the songs on it are that old. No, I did try. So a band I was in the 90s did a retrospective album about 7 or 8 years ago, similar time as I was meeting Josh.
This is the Male Nurse.
But yeah, a band called the Male Nurse, who we did a couple of John Peel sessions. We played a fair bit in London and in England, but we were messy people and it didn't end particularly well. They're all amazing people, but we didn't have any focus to complete an album. So we never did. And then an artist in Belgium that we all knew who would see us quite a lot and liked it offered to release an album of our attempts to make an album. And it was cool and it was moving to go back to being in your late 20s, but it was also a bit, I don't want to look back anymore. I had no interest in looking back. And people like Josh and another friend asked if there were other recordings from there, and I had a couple of cassettes and maybe made some rudimentary attempts to clean them up a bit. And I was just like, I don't want to look, if I'm going to do music, I want to do new music. And I think I initially tried using some of the riffs that I had written then. It just felt forced. And I just was not looking to feel forced. I was trying to get to the exact opposite place than forced, And I think, like it says in the thing, Soul Ronnie is an idea that came to me on a ferry when I was about 21. A piece of paper I scrawled on, but I never wrote any music. I just had it in my head what a piece of music would sound like. And I don't have the piece of paper in, but I think I was like, oh yeah, what was that thing? Or something. But none of the music's from then, I don't think. It's fine. I get why that's been misinterpreted. It makes sense, but I don't think I think all of it's written in the last 2, 3 years, I think.
Well, I think it's particularly cool how you went back and used sort of vintage, if you will, equipment from the 90s, like the Casio and the Yamaha keyboards, because they definitely have a very like era specific sound to them. To the fact now where people are buying the VSTs just so they can make like vaporwave or something to sort of try and emulate that. Were you influenced by any of those like sort of subgenres in that, or was it more just like this is the gear I had back then? So
it's the gear I had back then, and no, I think it's just the gear I had back then. It's the gear that people I knew had then that they had extra and they weren't really using. And the Yamaha has a sort of programmable drum machine, which if you program in something and then hit fill in, you get a really original rhythm. You just hold the fill in button. It hits these and quite a lot. And I think I thought, well, I remembered how much fun I would have doing that in London in the 90s. And I thought, well, that'll be a start. Like, I know that'll be fun or something. So, and it turned out there was the same keyboard. I could never remember the name of it. And then we have one friend who's a complete nut for Casio and Yamaha keyboards. And he was like, describe it. And he kept sending me images. And I was like, that's not it. And then eventually went, here it is. It's $60 and it's in Westminster, which is like an hour's drive away. And I was like, fuck, I thought this was some epic search. And all I have to do is get $60. I can drive an hour and I get one. It felt a bit cheap, but I did go and get it. And it's great. Use it all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely a very versatile tool for people that don't have a lot of experience with production, because it is kind of like, I think they used to bill it as like a studio in a box, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they were just what I had. And some of them, like anyone I had I had a couple of them as a teenager. And I think I assumed that if I went to a studio or if I went to someone like Josh, they'd be like, well, you can't use these sounds. These are like so done, but of course you can. I think you can use anything. You can use anything if you approach it, or if somebody assists you in giving it its own sound quality. Because those noises, those sounds can blend into each other a bit. But if somebody with an ear is able to pick them out and that's what I mean about what the things sound like before Josh mixed them. They're not insanely different, but they are certainly sonically. There's nothing there sonically. Not nothing, but it's murky. It's murky.
Yeah, it's murky. It's just yeah. Nothing's been EQ'd yet. Nothing's been kind of brought to kind of be highlighted or muted. Everything kind of just was like more or less at the same level going for the whole time.
Well, Josh, you said you refer to yourself as a knob turner on this album. So how would you say that compares to like working with Noah on Sinister Grift back in the fall, winter, and then, or your own like Sleep Cycle? I mean, obviously there's a big difference between being the primary songwriter and being a knob turner, but I guess really it's just like, how did that sort of, did it feel like a different experience than something you had gone through before, or did it feel like sort of common ground?
Well, it felt really common. I mean, I think, at this point, it's Young Prayer, Down There, Eucalyptus, Conference of Birds, the Tickly Feather record, my record, Bridge to Quiet. I feel like I'm missing one other of like Dave's things but all of those projects are including my own minus my record. I obviously played all the instruments too, or most of them. But I think that being in that role of being the person behind the controls and either sort of like having someone be like, I really want it to sound like X, and being like, okay, I know how to do that, or give me a minute, I can get there, or being the one that's like, wait, I hear what you're doing, but let me, whatever. So in some ways it's really familiar. I think that both, I think with Noah's record, actually, in a strange way, I felt this thing that I sort of remembered this last night. Lawrence and I were kind of rehashing things a bit. Most of the records that I've worked on up to this point, and I don't include Sleep Cycle because that was such a different thing. I worked on generally with Dave as part of it, working on A.B. Terry Records. Obviously, he's a really brilliant person with a really strong sense of production. So I feel like, I take a lot of pride in how those records sound, how they're mixed, and I think I did have a pretty strong role in the production of them. But they're Dave's records, and I think that he really owns the production of stuff. And I think that working on the Tickly Feather record many years ago, that was one that Dave and I started working on together, but I kind of finished on my own. So I think I started to get this feeling of like, yeah, I really like, this is me doing this. And I have like a certain ear and a certain skill set for getting to a certain place that I can't give to anybody else, or I can't kind of attribute to anybody else. But I think actually in a weird way, that session with Lawrence doing vocals in that studio, it was just Lawrence asking me for help, and it was kind of one of the first things I'd done where there was no imprint of anybody else from the group. I just was kind of having fun doing it, and having fun kind of starting to like really quickly produce this song and try to make it, pop and glow in the ways that I like things to pop and glow. And I remember like turning around and looking at Lawrence, and he was really moved by what he could hear. Like he was like, Jesus Christ, man, like this is amazing. And I think to me that actually felt really.
You can say crying.
All right, yeah, he was tearing up.
A little tear.
And I think that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds strange to say because at that point I'd already had mixed and co-produced a number of records at that point. But I think I was like, right, this is what I can do, turning knobs like this is. And I think one of my favorite things to do as an engineer, a mixer, producer, whatever you want to call it, whatever that role is sort of helping musicians feel empowered to make the things that they know they want to make. That's totally what I feel like with Lawrence. I mean, I know that he is just like, you do your thing and it sounds great, but I do feel like I'm just polishing what he's already done. I felt that way with Annie's music. I felt that way with my own music, in a weird way. I think kind of like finally getting to the, I would try to hand off mixes to other people to do. Pete Kember took a pass at Sleep Cycle before I finished it, and his mix for Good House sort of survived, but a lot of his other mixes didn't, because I started to realize like, I think I don't know what I want, and I'm asking other people to do it because I'm scared I can't get to the place that I want to get to. And then they would try, and I'd realize it wasn't what I wanted to hear. And so then I'd be like, no, this isn't right. And I would do it. And then I ultimately did it myself because I knew what my ears wanted to hear. And so I think working on this project with Lawrence has sort of been this cool place for me to start to really experience life outside of the immediate confines of Animal Collective, which of course I love and hope to continue to be, doing mixing work and whatever, like that's great. But I think that it felt kind of separate. And in a weird way, even though Noah gave me a lot more rope, to work on Sinister Grift. He really wanted me to come in as a producer. He asked me to do that. And so I still was essentially doing the same thing. I was a knob turner, but I was also, I would sort of suggest things for him to do. Similar, I guess similarly with like Lawrence being like, hey man, try this harmony. It's with Noah, I'd be like, I think this needs like hand percussion or this need, whatever. And so I don't know. I think I've lost track of the question, but yeah, it's both similar and it's very, very familiar. And also there is sort of a new sort of plateau. I feel like I've kind of started to discover in the last couple of years working on Lawrence's record and working on Noah's record. I think especially stand out as these kind of, new realms, I guess.
Are there any specific songs on this record that you had the most fun working on as a producer? The ones that like got you the most excited about the project?
Well, of course, this is where my very mangled brain comes into play, which is I don't remember any. I don't even remember what songs are on there. I think Soul Ronnie was pretty. Soul Ronnie, Lights, Poster, all pretty great. But I also something like what's the one where we sing together that you Hydrogen Tide. I mean, Hydrogen Tide in a weird way is a more simple mix. It doesn't, Soul Ronnie is like we got into this realm where it's like these background vocals and they're bouncing around and going into filters and all this kind of stuff. And that one is a little bit more like it just kind of starts and it goes. But that is also really satisfying to me, like just kind of getting like a really foundational good sound of something that just feels like it has locomotion on its own. And I mean, they were all fun. The both of the kind of quiet ones are really what's one with the tremolo voice,
Upheaval.
Upheaval. I mean, I all of them. Yeah, they're all super fun.
I didn't mean to make you pick a different favorite child.
No, I there's no duds as far as I'm concerned. I had a good time with all of them.
And of course it is because it is, of course, Josh, not necessarily being modest, but I've never spoken to Noah or Dave or these guys about what it's like work, but like when I have been in studios before, in bands or doing stuff with people, you think that you're in control. You think that you're there because you've got these ideas, you want to do this, you know what you want. Are they going to be the person that gets you? Are they going to be the person that can do what you want them to? And in this process, quite quickly, and I think because we have the dynamic of having worked together, and it was my company, like Josh was a really good carpenter, but it was my company. I was the one who was having to bill. So I was having to be in charge, for want of a better word.
He was my boss.
I was his boss, which is not an easy dynamic for most people. It certainly was not always easy for us, both quite confident people in our way. So when it came time to go to the studio, I was very much handing over to Josh's realm because I don't know how you spend 7 hours on a vocal. I had no idea. 7 hours on a vocal, it seemed insane to me. But we did, and by the end, I understood why. I understood that some people can draw things out of you. Some people reaffirm your beliefs. Other people see something and draw something else out. And I don't want to underestimate what that is actually like when somebody, not they say, I'm going to draw something out, but they spot something and they push at a part of you that has not been pushed at. And they know how to get a thing out of you that you didn't perhaps even know was there. It's a pretty immense skill. And I imagine other people who've worked with Josh would say the same, that like, yeah, there's a certain point where the guy's, you think he's in his own realm, but actually he's drawing things out of you. I've never spent anywhere near this much time on any sort of creative process with someone, so I don't really have anything to compare it to, but it's so stimulating in good and bad ways. Sometimes you get home and you're like, fuck, he's made it into his thing. It sounds like, oh no, it sounds, and I would, the most disagreements we would ever have would I'd be like, no, there's this sound that you put on things and it's starting to sound like you. And Josh would be like, I don't know what sound you're talking about. And those would be these little bickers. And I'd be like, I don't know what it is either, mother. Like, this is your realm. I don't know what you've done. But this keyboard now sounds like this. So that would be the only, and they weren't even disagreements. That's just part of bringing a thing to fruition, you know? But having got to whatever 52 without having any of the vocabulary for it, initially it was quite overwhelming. But then to feel, oh no, this will be an actual collaboration. It's not you handing it over to somebody else. It is to a certain degree, which is a great thing to be able to do. But also it's our communication was pretty continual through it. There was definitely no moment of like, dude, back off. This is my thing, or dude, this is what I do. It just, I don't know, that part didn't ever.
And I think again back to like my my feeling about sort of being someone whose role is as much to empower and to educate. I think that Lawrence is really good at picking sounds. He's actually a really good arranger. He has a really good sense of like song structure. Like he has all those things, and maybe would have been a little bit less confident to like speak them when we first started working. And now I feel like as we're working, he's much clearer about knowing. And I don't feel like it's like a new skill. I just think it's like now that we've done this, it seems to me like he just now has a language, or he knows how something can get from, he's seen the number of times that something that's like, oh, that's a really boring sound, like don't worry about that, becomes a feature on a song. I would think, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, like start to make it be like, no, I get how, I know where this can go. And now I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It feels really, it's cool to get that validated back to me. That's what I'm doing, but that's the whole point of it. I don't really feel like I would never want to be a producer in a position where someone didn't want to be getting better at what they were doing or learn more how to do it better. To me, it is kind of that I am just wanting to pull something out that's already there, and that's what's fun to me. And hopefully, at a certain point, that person can just sort of figure it out themselves.
Work a computer.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it gets to that point where you're just like, all right, yeah, if you don't need me, you don't need me.
I'm a fair away from that.
Sure, but
just periodically when I'm trying to find a track from a mix, we'll just be like, dude, your computer is insane. How do you find anything? I don't know. Can you do it? And then I end up offering to pay him hourly rate to organize my songs. I'm a complete. I was just born at exactly the last year I was in school, a computer appeared in the library. A Commodore appeared in the library, and I was like, "Is that?" And I left school very soon after. And I've always just worked in practical fields, and I'm still. I mean, I can operate GarageBand, like it's a 4-track. You know what I mean? I can't edit. I mean, no.
Yeah,
it's incredibly basic what I can do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, no, I think that's so cool. Obviously, like you both learned a lot from each other in this process, and I think it kind of echoes, Dave Avitaire just released this track with Noah, aka Panda Bear, and in the little blurb that was with that was a lot about how these collaborations can be such a like learning process, and any sort of bouncing of ideas it kind of like creates something new or unlocks something. It feels like it did unlock something with you, Lawrence, working with Josh on this one. Um, now that this has happened, is this like a standalone project, or has it been unlocked to the point that, hey, we're gonna get some more Herald records down the line? Like, this is really good music,
There's so much.
Yeah, we're already working on the next. We're starting to work on the
Really?
Next. Yeah, he's sort of like similar to like the Ariel Pink or something. It is literally hard drives full of like song ideas, and so it's like we just a couple weeks ago or a week ago went through a list of it was like 25 potential songs, which I know is just a fraction of things that exist on his hard drive that I probably never even heard, to winnow down to like 15 to start focusing on. And yeah, and I'm excited to kind of just it's a fun project, so it's cool to just kind of keep going with it. And he's always playing the way he plays shows is with backing tracks that mostly I mix. Sometimes another friend of ours mixes them, and sometimes he just uses them raw as he did them. But so some of the songs we had already kind of started working on, because a song that he knew he'd want to kind of develop at some point. He wanted a mix that he could use live, so I'd kind of already started to do some shaping, and so yeah, we're.
It was an insane couple of years, I suppose, and it's like lockdown stories. Nobody wants to hear lots, but like I go out. I suppose I'm a pretty social person, and I would. Yeah, my wife works 3 nights a week. I would always go to the cinema, go to the pub, go out, go see people, and then lockdown happened, and there was nothing. And it totally coincided. I already had the stuff, and I'm like, all right, I suppose I should really start using all that crap in the basement that I've borrowed from people. And I don't know. I don't think for 20 years I realized I was a frustrated musician. I don't think even when I was in bands, I realized I was just a drummer in these bands, sitting there going like, that's terrible. I should start writing songs. I could write better. You know what I mean? Like, and then not doing it, I think you probably have all the same ideas, but they lodge somewhere, and it's just having the ability to dig them out or something, you know? Because I don't know, they still do, to be honest. And at some point I may go, oh, you know what, these aren't good anymore. I should stop. Or at some point they'll stop. I don't know. At some point Josh will be like, you got anything else? I say, no, I got nothing. But it seems quite a long way off. And in some regard, yeah, the idea of it doing it completely differently, like maybe a third album, at some point it'd be really fun to have a band to teach it to people. We all know it takes a long time for a band to get really good, you know, like that's how, like really good bands develop at an actual pace. And I think that seeing that with Josh, of having been in bands where I thought this is the band we're going to be in forever, this is the band we're going to take from raw teenage ideas through to like our great records, and then you don't do it because you just screw up. You just, you know, you're not focused enough. It isn't the friendships you thought they were. To then see like a group that is the same four people that have all developed and are still from teenage years up to mid-40s, still bouncing ideas off each other in the exact same way. Clearly, I'm not going to be able to do that. That isn't really feasible, because different stages of life. Everyone I know who I would ask, unless I ask a bunch of teenagers to be in my group who don't have focus and just like, cool, let's go for it. I don't know, that would present other problems, you know. But that's an exciting idea. So maybe the next record maybe would be a different approach. But honestly, there's a whole batch that developed at the same pace as these sort of thing. And I kind of get anyone I'd rather do it. I just want to do it here, because I know what the last one was like. And maybe you have to switch up periodically, but I don't know. This has just become a bit of a home away from home, you know. And the way I leave here, we say, all right, man, see you later. And I get in my truck, and Josh has already sent me the minute, and I play it on the way home, and I'm like, fuck yeah, he totally got what I meant. He totally got what I meant. It's just, I don't know, I wouldn't give that up for anything, you know. It's a great juxtaposition to work. I mean, I like my job fine, but to have that in the evenings is an amazing, unexpected juxtaposition to the realities of work, you know, truly. So I'm not looking to change it. I just need to get a little bit of money, so I can pay him, because he's good, you know.
For sure. That's, I think you're in good hands, Lawrence, because like, especially if you do want to switch things up, I mean, Animal Collective's like known for switching it up constantly. So I think you are in good hands there.
Yeah, you're definitely not in a creatively limited, like, so nobody's checking to see if it's a wise career move. It's not really that sort of scene, you know. It's my impression.
Yeah, and
people are following a sound, and that's all. That's all I would.
And we've switched up, you know, who we work with on a record almost every time.
Yeah.
So I know if that day comes, that day comes.
Right.
I'll take dinner. I'll take you to dinner. I'll do it nice.
All right, cool.
Or you'll take me.
Sure.
Whichever way. Yeah, just send me in. I can't deal with a face-to-face.
So Linear B is available digitally on all streaming platforms. It's available on Bandcamp, digital version, and there is a vinyl, limited to a pretty small release, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, once we'd finished the record, I knew it was a record. I knew it was the songs in the order I wanted them to be in. And I was like, I suppose I'll just put it on Bandcamp myself, because I know plenty of people in bands, but have any notion that anyone would want to, because it's not like I'm touring. It's not like I have any I'm 54, whatever. I'm not like out there selling it. But Josh was like, you should send it to people. It's got sound. Like somebody will, you never know. Somebody might say. So I sent it to quite a few different labels that I like, and got really good responses of like, oh, that's cool. Can't wait to hear the next one. Nobody said, let's do this. But then I have a friend in Glasgow called Jacob Yates, who Jake's got teenage kids. He's about my age, but every 5 years, Jake makes a new record, and it's a completely new record, and there's no messing around with it because he can't really tour, but he puts everything, all his free time into it, and every 5 years releases a new album. So he had posted that he had a new record coming out, and I said, "Oh, that's great, man! Congratulations! Who's releasing it?" And he said, "Well, there's a label in Glasgow that's run out of a pizza shop." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Pizza in Glasgow? Glasgow never, I lived in Glasgow for years. There's no good pizza." And he says, "Yeah, it's really good pizza. It's on the south side. It's called Errol's Hot Wax. And they run a record label out of the back." And I'm like, that's the perfect aesthetic. That's like a dub label or something. Or like a 50s doo-wop label, or like Baltimore club label or something would be run out of the back of a pizza shop. I was like, perfect aesthetic. And I was like, is the guy looking for other stuff? And he's like, I don't know. He's like a young guy just starting a label in Glasgow. So I sent it to this guy, Stevie, and really quickly he got back and he was like, this is great, man. I love it. I'd love to release it. Do you want to do it on vinyl? And I'm like, sure. Why wouldn't you? And I've never met Stevie, but we know quite a lot of the same people. Glasgow's quite like Baltimore in many regards. And he's been great. And he was like, do you want to do it on colored vinyl? And I was like, can it look like a pizza? He said, well, that's not colored vinyl. That's a picture dish. I was like, can it be in a pizza box? And he's like, that's a little impractical. But, as we moving forward, these are ideas. So yeah, Glasgow is really good pizza. Can't wait to get back and try it. And the labels run from the pizza shop, which really works for me as an aesthetic. But it's a very, very small thing. I mean, it's just Stevie, young guy running the label. He printed up 300 and he's taken care of, he's been doing an amazing job getting it out there. But he did, I think there's 300 copies of the vinyl initially. So I got 60. So there's 240 of them in the UK. And beyond that, I don't know, because it's all kind of a surprise. And then there's a label in Baltimore called Shiny Boy Press, who mostly just do cassettes, I think.
Yeah.
They've done a couple of vinyl things, but again, it's two guys, like 30, really enthusiastic, releasing a really wide range of stuff, and just brilliant, enthusiastic people to be around. And a guy I work with's band was being released by him, and he said, "Oh, you should send one to Colin." And Colin was like, "Oh, I'll totally do the cassette." So there's a cassette, and there's a record. There's a record in Glasgow and a cassette in Baltimore. You just have to.
Well, there's one of them is going to get shipped over to Canada very soon because I feel like I have to hear this one on vinyl. Um,
Shit.
I think I'll eat a pizza while I while I listen to it as well. What's your favorite pizza? What's the best pizza to pair with Linear B?
Good luck.
You asked the impossible.
No, it's not impossible, is it? I think a really good quality Greek pizza is my thing.
And the Greek connection too. That's even more perfect.
Yeah, yeah. A really decent Greek with some really fresh feta, I think. Yeah, I would say it's my favorite.
Cool. All right. Well, when the record arrives, I'm gonna go find a Greek pizza, and I'll take a photo of me eating the pizza while listening to the record.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, the elephant in the room, we're always going to have to ask this when we get you on, Josh, because Sleep Cycle is such a, monument in this fan group of your band and everything you guys do that's ancillary. I know that you talked about having to delay working on your next solo album to work on Sinister Grift. Is that getting moved up the pipeline any, or are you still just sort of feeling it out and working and seeing what comes of it?
I'm working quite a bit. I haven't started recording yet, but I'm writing a lot, and I've been playing a handful of shows this year, locally, just sort of to work out ideas. And I it does feel like every couple weeks or month, I'm like, okay, this month it's gonna be completely devoted to nothing but, and then stuff does come up that sort of shifts things in terms of my, like, I don't know, I wish I kind of had the funds to just go lock myself in the studio for a month and not have any family or friends or, you know, jobs or bills I got to pay. But anyway, it keeps kind of coming up. But no, it's very much happening. I have probably at this point like 17 or 18 different songs that it's like I'm gonna have to pick. So there's a lot, and I'm just trying to work through it all. So you've all learned, and I've learned to not count on any timeline coming out of my mouth, but it is like what I'm kind of most focused on right now when I'm not. I had to work on a Sinister Grift B-side today that they just need it in the next week or two, for a 7-inch, and, you know, working on Suffer Lawrence because it's fun, and I'll have to take jobs here and there, but I'm trying to have that be my primary focus right now because it needs to get done.
We miss your Instagram streams of you doodling stuff out on the piano, so it's always cool to see that part of the process.
Thank you. That's very kind. Well, maybe there'll be more of those at some point.
Is there a release date yet for Sinister Grift?
I don't know if I'm authorized to say. I think at this point, it's going to be next year. That's what I know, which is, that's all I can. Yeah, enough said. I don't. Yeah.
That's fair.
Shake my damn head is my response to that.
Well, all good things take time.
Yeah, we took the time. It's done. I don't know.
I guess they take more time than that.
Hey, we've got patience. We waited for both Time Skiffs and Isn't It Now, so that's fine.
True. Yeah, we can wait.
Things work out the way they do.
They will.
Well,
cool.
For those that have gotten through this whole interview and still haven't heard the record, please go check it out on Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. Buy a vinyl, buy a cassette, buy more than one. You know, support indie music, and let's get Lawrence excited enough to make a new record as soon as possible, because, man, I know that every time we prep for one of these, I just listen to the thing over and over again to get familiar with it. And this one, I was just excited every time because I just knew that there were so many little things and riffs and elements and textures that it's just really, it feels like just diving into this swimming pool full of musical colors that I would like to, you know, experience that more. And Josh, I will say that whenever you do make your second album, you can whittle down the songs. That's fine. It's part of the process. But more than 6 would be great. We would, the more, the better.
No question.
Well, thanks guys so much for giving us the time, and it has been really interesting to learn about all the story behind this, and I can't wait to see what's next, as we've said over and over again, but that's never not the case, so we appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks
to you both. Really appreciate you taking the time.
All right,
Yeah,
y'all.
thanks, guys. Have a good
stay
one.
cool and have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Soon.
You guys too.
Peace.
Bye.
Castaway shards of a long shattered mirror snag on the skin in a storm. Reflections of heaven divided by 7 suggest a glitch still